Hi class, today we're going to be talking about Brazilian independence. This is what we're going to start with today. Brazil remained calm under the rule of João VII in the 1810s. To have the royal court in Rio de Janeiro, they say was very expensive, and the book also states that they had very lavish parties. The unpopular war with the Spanish-speaking neighbors were reaching the border of Brazil in the south. João, by the pressure of the British, he restricted the slave trade, making the slave owners very unhappy. And foreigners, especially the English and the French, came in big groups into Brazil in the 1808 and on, and they took advantage of the free trade. And this brought a lot of liberalizing changes of attitude, which will influence the Brazilians. João had made Brazil and Portugal equal and himself king of both. The Portuguese assembly wanted Brazil to go back to the colonial state. In 1821, João returned to Lisbon, leaving his son Prince Pedro behind in Rio. The provinces established their own juntas and were sending their representatives to Lisbon bypassing Rio, even though Pedro was in Rio, which is very interesting. By 1822, Rio's native-born elite, they formed a Brazilian party that claimed to represent the Brazilian people against the Portuguese recolonization. But this did not include the slaves. And Pedro was prepared by his father, and he declared independence. The monarchy was going to be within the Bragança royal family. So you would have King João being the king of Portugal, and Prince Pedro being the king of Brazil. So they stayed all in the Bragança royal family. So this is a picture of Pedro the First. Back then, I guess they had different hairstyles and sideburns. You'll see all of them have the sideburns, and they have this uniform with the shoulders like that, huh? Portugal wanted his return, but Pedro refused. And he wanted to stay in Brazil as instructed by his father, and he declared independence and independent constitutional monarchy. He called the representatives of the sovereign people to write a constitution. In 1822, Brazil was independent, while they maintained the same social hierarchy that had all the Creole slave-owning elite at the top, and at the bottom you had the African slaves. Pedro I became the emperor of Brazil, and he achieved political unity for a while. But later on, all that will go away as well. The Patriot victories in Spanish America, going back to the Spanish Americas between 1815 and 1825, Fernando VII, the king, returned to the throne because the French were pushed out of Spain and they won. So the king returns to Spain, and the first thing he does is to annul the liberal constitution of Cadiz of 1812 and set out to crush all the rebels in America. Mexico, the guerrilla followers of Father Morelos, remained strong, but unable to defeat the royalists. Spain had its own liberal revolution in 1820, where the liberals were forcing King Fernando VII to restore the constitution of 1812. A Creole army commander, Agustin Iturbide, began to win guerrillas in Mexico. And this is a picture of Agustin Iturbide. You see the same sideburns, right, class, right here? In the hairstyle, in the shoulder pads, huh? I don't know. I think it's very interesting. And his contact person was Vicente Guerrero, a mestizo, who joined forces with him. Iturbide and Guerrero win, and they were setting up a constitutional Mexican monarchy that preserved their religious and military privileges and offered social union, equality between Americanos and Peninsulars or Spaniards. In 1821, Iturbide entered Mexico City and he declared himself as King Agustin I. And he was only a Creole without any royal blood. And he lasted about a year, and the military leaders ejected him and ushered into a republic. Simón Bolívar is the liberator of South America. He began to set his triumphs in 1817. He participated in the Venezuelan independence. He planned to get the Llaneros on his side. Remember, the Llaneros were the dark-skinned cowboys who were against the Creoles rising up in Venezuela. And he used courage and nativism to attract the Llaneros. And he was very effective. He was a very eloquent speaker. And I don't think I'll be able to show you the movie, but if you can find it on Netflix or anywhere, it's called The Liberator. Maybe I'll put a cover of it on the module so you can see what it looks like. And if you're able to do it, then you can do some extra credit questions if you are willing to watch that on your own. He crossed the Orinoco River plains during floods and rainy season, very horrible conditions. And then he climbed the Andes in the snow, carrying all the equipment, to fight the war and attacked the Spanish forces from behind. So it was a surprise attack, and he was very successful. The viceregal capital of Bogota fell to Bolívar. So this is a picture of Vicente Guerrero. You see the same fashion again, right? The sideburns and the shoulder things, huh? And this is the great speech of freedom that Bolivar gave out. And I'll put it on Canva so you can watch it. By late 1822, Bolivar also captured Caracas in Quito, controlling all of northern South America. So he is like a George Washington of South America, Simón Bolívar. And he captured Venezuela and Ecuador, right? Caracas and Quito. José de San Martín had trained a combined army of Argentine and Chilean Patriot Army in western Argentina, and they crossed the Andes in a surprise attack similar to what Bolívar did, and he defeated the Chilean royalists. He gained strength in Chile and moved to Lima, which would be something that he wanted to help, defeat the Spaniards in Lima, Peru. But later on you will see Simón Bolívar is the one who ends the job. The Viceroy of Peru left Lima into the Peruvian highlands after capturing Lima and declaring Peruvian independence. San Martín was not able to finish his job. Here you see a picture of José de San Martín, and he was able to liberate Argentina in 1810. Bolívar and San Martín had a personal meeting in Guayaquil, which is in Ecuador. It is not known what was said, but for some reason, San Martín returned to Argentina and he left Bolívar in charge. And Bolívar will be the key figure to liberate Peru. It took Bolívar 2 years. In 1824, Bolívar liberated 2 more countries, one which has his name Bolivia. So Bolivia, the country where I used to live, has the name from Bolívar. So you have Peru and Bolivia. In the Battle of Ayacucho, which was fought at 10,000 feet above sea level, the Patriots captured the last Spanish viceroy in America. And that was the last battle that they will fight, the Battle of Ayacucho in Peru. The Spanish-American Wars of Independence were finally over. Only Cuba, Puerto Rico remained colonies until 1898. And we'll learn more about what happens to those countries with the U.S. intervention, including the Philippines, right? The Philippines was also part of the Spanish colony. So this is a picture of the Battle of Ayacucho in 1824. And we're going to talk about all these unfinished revolutions. For all the talk about America for Americanos, nativism, for the people in America that we're all the same, the hierarchy did not change. The Creoles are the only ones who got all the benefits, and they stayed at the top. As for the indigenous, I guess, stayed at the bottom, or the African slaves in Brazil. The independence did not undo colonialism. It made them create a post-colonial period. It was self-governing because the Creoles were in charge now. The Spanish were out, but everything else remained the same. Okay, it's shaped by the colonial heritage and is still patriarchal. Patriot women became powerful symbols, and in practice, equal citizenship did not happen for many decades until the 20th century, and I think it's still not equal in many countries of Latin America. Americanos lost relevance, and Spanish America divided into a dozen nations. The viceroyalty of Rio de la Plata became Bolivia, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Argentina. The independence was achieved, but the struggle to decolonize Latin America was only beginning. And it's very interesting where this is going to turn to. You will see as we go through the other chapters. The viceroyalty of Rio de la Plata here, you have a picture. So now you have Brazil, right? And then you have all these countries that will divide into Argentina. The viceroyalty will divide into Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Bolivia. So the current countercurrents, the gaze of the outsider. How did the outsiders look into Latin America? And this is some of the views of some of the travelers. They view Latin America as ignorant, corrupt, dishonest, and swayed by superstition, which is very interesting, the view that people had outside of Latin America. But the women travelers, they will describe Latin America as noblest looking cities, humble people, gentle, polite, beautiful faces. And this is a view that was written by Frances Calderón de la Barca. She was Scottish and the wife of a Spanish diplomat in Mexico. And during this time, we have wet nurses, slaves feeding babies. It's very interesting, huh? All the Creoles will have their babies, and the ones who will be nursing and taking care of the babies will be the slaves. And this was this showed the status of the person. It showed the wealth status of the person who had wet nurses in their house. So that's it for now. This is the end of chapter 4. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time. Bye.